Hold on, I'll fix it. I can't. I'll get you fixed here, Reid. You're muted, sir. Okay.
All right. Reid Howell, the alcoholic. It's by the grace of God, the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the people I met in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous, found in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. Good sponsorship and fees. I haven't found it necessary to take a drink or anything else since January 21st of 1988. And for that, I'm forever grateful. And by all rights, you should have a different speaker here tonight, because at one time I was called a hopeless case and they threw the key away. They threw the book at me and then threw the key away. And we hear a lot about grace and mercy in AA. And I'd just like to throw out a couple short definitions for them. Grace to me is getting what I don't deserve. And mercy is not getting what I do deserve. And I've received a lot of that from God in the form of different miracles. And I am from Hazel, South Dakota. I used to live in Sioux Falls. I sobered up in a double maximum security prison in Stillwater, Minnesota. I never thought I was an alcoholic. I didn't know what a hard drinker was. I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I knew I just drank because it made me feel better. It made me feel like the way I thought other people felt all the time, by my judging their outsides according to my insides. I grew up in Northeast South Dakota, just about 3.5 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And there was no alcoholism in my immediate family. But my grandfather on my mother's side was an alcoholic, and she had 6 brothers, and I believe at least 4 of them were alcoholic. I don't know what effect that had on me. That's just my history. And the first time I seen anybody drunk was one of my older brothers. And I was in the middle of 5 kids. I came from a good home, taught right and wrong. But alcohol, when you grow up out in the middle of nowhere, alcohol is like something to do, you know. And I saw my older brothers get drunk. And I saw one first drunk at this dance in this little small town not far from home here. And I seen him throw up and get sick and make a fool out of himself. And I said, I'm never going to be like that. Well, a couple of years go by, there's a dance in this small town again. And a friend of mine, he got his mother's car and a 6-pack of beer somehow, and a couple girls to go for a ride, and he asked me to go along, and I said sure. So we get out in the country and we break open a can of beer, and I didn't like the taste of it. I drank about half of it, and that was it. No effect. But a couple of years go by, and my brothers were drinking, and they were partiers, but not alcoholic, and they were telling me stories about this and that. So I decided the next time I got a chance to drink, I was going to drink enough to see what it's all about. So this one night I got a pitcher of red beer, and I drank that pitcher of red beer, and I got to feeling pretty good. And if a little is good, more is better. And so I had gotten myself a pint of whiskey too, not knowing really anything about whiskey. But so I figured you drink it like you do beer. So I tipped it up and I drank about a quarter of that pint of whiskey, and it was just like magic happened. It seemed like I could do things I couldn't normally do. And one thing I could do is talk to girls. And because I was very shy, I'd been sexually molested when I was young. And it just seemed to make everything go away. And later on, when I worked a 4-step out of the big book with a sponsor, I found out what I had was really a fear problem. It made those fears go away for a while. And so, again, after a little bit, I drank about another quarter of that pint, and then something else happened. First, I felt like a spiritual experience, and then secondly, I got sick. And I threw up, blacked out, woke up the next morning at home, with a terrible hangover and swore I was never going to do it again. In the book, they talk about a mental obsession. Looking back to that first time I drank and a few days shortly after, I realized I had that mental obsession right from the beginning. Because just 2-3 days after swearing off, saying I was never going to drink again, I started getting, this is all hindsight, of course. I realized that I was getting uptight and nervous and whatever. And my mind saved that little kernel of information about what I know what'll fix this. So 3-4 days later, I make a decision. I'm going to drink every chance I could because it felt like I had a solution to my problems. Now, I've heard straight people talk that when they drink a couple of drinks, they get a feeling of being out of control and they don't want to drink. That was never how it worked for me. When I drank, I finally got a feeling of being in control. So why would I not continue to drink? And I believe too that I had the physical allergy right from the start too. Because once I started, it was like Katie barred the door. I didn't know what was going to happen. And the more I drank, the easier they went down. And the more I craved the next drink. And so I got in trouble a little bit in high school. Made it through though. I met a girl after high school, fell in love, didn't know what I was going to do. So I joined the Army, figuring when I got out of the Army, I could go to school and get a career. I got into basic training, and the first week you're quarantined, and the second week they took us down to get the haircut. Excuse me. And I noticed they had beer at the PX where we got the haircuts. So I am sneaking out on weekends now to drink, and that could have got me in a jackpot full of trouble. And so I'm sneaking out on weekends. I'm looking back now, I know I had that mental obsession then too. And so I made it through basic, made it through my training. I get sent to Fort Riley, Kansas, and I can drink I can sneak a drink anytime now. And I was always a blackout, pass out drinker. And so that's how I drank, and I passed out. And there was a guy stationed with me there from back home. And one day he walks into my barracks. It was on a Friday night, and we're going to go out drinking. And he opens up his hand, and he's got these little white pills in there. And he says, he said, take these. And I said, what are they? And he said, well, if you take these, you'll be able to drink all night. So that sounded like a solution to my passing out. So I took them immediately. And, he was right. I was able to drink all night, remember most of what I did, and it was off to the races with that too now. And so I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, but this is my story. I'm a mixed bag, you might say, but an alcoholic for sure. And so anyway, this girl I fell in love with, we had gotten engaged, and she went off to college, and she found someone else and broke my heart. And I was just so full of bitter resentments, and I didn't know what to do with them at the time. I had no idea. And so I was becoming an angry drunk by now, and I wanted to go get this guy. And, I don't know who said this. I'd give him credit if I knew who it was. But it sums up when I was drinking. He said when he was drinking, the solution to his problems were often worse than his problems. That would be me to a T. And so I wanted to go get this guy. I wanted to get my revenge on this guy for sleeping with my girlfriend. And so me and my friend were drinking in the bar this one night, and we come up with a solution. And the solution was, I was a clerk typist. I was an MP, but I knew how to type. So I was typing up Provost Marshal's reports. So my solution was that we came up with, we'll break my finger, then I won't be able to type, and they'll give me an administrative leave. That sounded logical. So we get dropped off a couple blocks from the barracks, and we're going to do this. And I lay my finger out over the curb, and he stomped on it a couple of times. And, I'm thinking, that ain't broke. So we had to walk a couple blocks to the barracks. We get back to the barracks, and I lay it over the edge of a pool table, and he whacks it as hard as he can with a cue stick. It's broke. And so that's how insane I was, you know. And guess what? They didn't give me that administrative leave. So my next solution to my problem was I went AWOL looking for this guy. And thank God I didn't find him, because I don't know what I might have did. But anyway, after a period of time, I went back and suffered my consequences. And the first day I could go back downtown, I was back downtown drinking in the bars. And this guy come out and I vented my anger on him and I assaulted him. And I end up in the military stockade. And after some time, I remember when I was sitting in that stockade too, I said, I still had a little bit of faith in yet. And I said a prayer to this God. I said, get me out of this, God. And I swear I'll turn my life around. I'll never drink. I'll start going back to church. You know, I'll do the next right thing, you might say. And wouldn't you know it, about 6 weeks later, they put me out on a PR bond. And I go back to the military, and what do you think is the first thing I did when I got out of jail? I got drunk, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. I went right back to the alcohol, because that was always my solution to my problems at that time. And so moving along, I got released from the military and sent back to South Dakota, and I wasn't back here very long. I don't know what it was, a year. And I was running around doing my thing. I was supposed to be working. I got 3 years federal probation out of that charge on there. And while I got busted with some drugs, my PO calls me in. He gives me a choice. He said, you can go do 3 years in the federal pen, or you can go to alcohol and drug treatment. So that's a no-brainer. I went to alcohol and drug treatment. But I didn't listen to anything they had to say. I ignored everything, because I have my life figured out. This is not a problem for me. And it reminds me of that quote in the back of the book by Herbert Spencer. I just love it. I'm going to read it to you here. It says, there is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. I wouldn't give it a chance. I would not give it a chance. And so anyway, I get out of that treatment program, and it wasn't shortly after that I was headed to prison for the first time. And I get up to prison and I give it a lot of thought, and I diagnosed my problem. My problem was I got caught. So I was going to try to learn how to be a better crook. And that's what I was doing. I hung out with the older safe crackers and burglars and drug dealers, and I went in just trying to make connections and learn. So I had to do some time in South Dakota, and then I had time to do in Nebraska. When I got done with my time in South Dakota, I jumped bond on some charges in Nebraska. So they were waiting to pick me up and take me there, and I had to do some time there, and I get out of there. And first thing I did when I got out of prison, cashed that little check I had and went to a liquor store and got me a 12-pack of beer, you know, and because my solution is still working at this time. And I drank that on the way back, smoked the joint on the prison grounds, and called the guy when I got back to town to get me something, because I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink for a few days. I know that. I've been thinking about drinking for a long time. And he had it. And about a month later, I'm facing charges again. And I get a court-appointed, well, no, actually, I hired an attorney, a hotshot attorney. He found a loophole in the law that said if you're a first-time drug offender, you ought to be given alcohol and drug treatment. So I'm off to my second treatment program. And this time I'm beginning to dummy up just a little bit. I know I can't drink, and I know I can't do the hard drugs. But so I figured out what I'm going to do is what you've heard this before, the marijuana maintenance program. I'm just going to smoke dope, and that'll be my recovery. And so before I could get out of this treatment program, though, I had to have a sponsor. And so there was this guy that did the CD department in the first time when I was in prison. I knew his name. I knew he was in AA. I give him a call, and he says, yeah, you'll be my sponsor. He said, call me when I get out. So I get out, I give him a call, and he says, go down the south side and sit in room 1. That's where there will be a big book study meeting. And so I listened to it. I went to that meeting. I got there early. And then I started looking around at all of you and I thought, gee, I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. And I got up again before the meeting ever started, never gave it a chance. And so it was off to the races. And my smoking pot deal, that worked pretty good for about 4 to 6 weeks. I don't remember really. Every time I'd get a bag, I was working then, I'd go over to this guy's house and he'd always ask me if I wanted to do a couple lines and cut them out, and I'd say no, and out the door I'd go. Well, this one night, Bob Seeger was playing in town, and he cut them lines out, and he asked me if I wanted to do them, and my mind told me a lie, and I believed it. It said it would be all right. You could just do those two, go do some dancing, chase the skirts a little bit, and everything will be okay. So I did that. We lived about 10 minutes apart. I got about halfway home, and all my plans changed. I went back and got all the money I had, went back and bought all I could afford, got a bottle, and was off the races. And what ended that was 22 months later, the infamous words, all rise. Maybe some of you have heard that before too. I'm back in court again in Brookings County, about an hour north of Sioux Falls. And I get pulled over and I got a bunch of controlled substances on me, and they post a bond. I get out. I go back to Sioux Falls. 8, 9, 10 days later, they bust me again, possession. And so I go to a jury trial on the charges. I got the courts to appoint me a public pretender. So I'm going to court there in Sioux Falls, and I won't take a plea bargain. I'm seeing a doctor at the VA. I thought I'm going to get this alcohol and drug treatment program. I go in for sentencing. They got me charged with a little habitual. They find me guilty at the jury trial. Instead of getting 2 years, they sentenced me to 4.5. And I get up to the prison, and I'm up there about a month, and they come and charge me with an armed robbery. And again, I get a public pretender to represent me, and I file for a fast and speedy trial, and they dismiss the case. Along about this time now, I'm locked up about, I think it was 8 months, and I got them other charges. They said, you'll plead guilty to 2, we'll drop the other 2 and drop the habitual offender. So that sounds like a deal. I plead guilty to those 2. A couple of years go by, and I'm out on the West Farm, Trustee Farm, and they come and recharge me with that armed robbery when I got about 100 days short of my parole date. And I didn't think they could do that, but they could. And so anyway, they offered me 10 years in a plea bargain. And I said, no, I sat here all this time. You could have brought these charges against me. You got to do better and back. So they come back with a second offer in 9 years. My attorney calls me, and I said, okay, I'll take that. Then I went back to my cell, and I got high, and I got what they call, the book calls a resentment. And I thought, how can they do this to me? And I couldn't wait to get out of my cell the next morning and call them, tell them to stick that plea bargain, where the sun don't shine. And he said, I'll do that, but you're the one that's going to get stuck. They're going to give you life without parole on the habitual offender. And so we go to court. They find me guilty, and guess what? I go before the judge. And before sentencing me on the habitual offender, there's no defense against it. They just look at your record, and if you got 3 felonies, you're a candidate. So before sentencing, the judge says, Mr. Holliday, you're a career criminal. You're a hopeless case. You can't and won't change. Therefore, I sentence you to life without parole. And it's like I kind of just went numb. I think it was anger. And when that just twisted me off. Let's just say that. And over the course of the next, I did pretty well. About 1.5 years later, I got in serious trouble for assaulting an inmate. They threw me in the hole. I got out after 6 months in the hole. I get out, and I'm in trouble again. I'm back in the hole, and I'm thinking something's got to change. I didn't know what to do, so I put in for a transfer to Minnesota, and they transferred me over there. And I get over to Minnesota. And I told myself, this is a chance to start over, stay clean. No one knows you here, stay out of trouble. But again, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so it wasn't but 2 months, and I was right back into everything. Jumping ahead 3 years, about 3.5 years, I'm trying to quit. And I drank prison hooch a couple of times, but it was terrible. I swear it's the only thing I ever drank where I got the hangover before I got the buzz. And it was just terrible. So I'm sticking with the drugs. And I'm talking to this lifer, another lifer. And I noticed this guy around the cell hall. What I noticed was this guy usually had a smile on his face and he was upbeat. And I knew he had been in 10 years and I had been in 8.5 years now. And I don't know, maybe that's why I went to talk to this guy, because he was different. He was just different. And so I went to talk to him and I told him about how hopelessly and helplessly addicted I was and how I wanted to quit. Now I tried everything and nothing worked. And he said, well, you can do with your drugs what I did with my anger. Then he shared with me how he had stabbed a guard because of his anger. He couldn't control his anger, and they gave him a life sentence. And so when he told me that, I just wanted to laugh in his face because, I had parted ways with God years before this, and I didn't believe in God anymore. But it stuck in my head, and I can't tell you if it was 2 days later or 2 weeks later. But this one night, it was New Year's Day night of 1988, I went into my cell that night. And I prayed to this God that I didn't believe in. And I told him how hopelessly and helplessly addicted I was, how I wanted to quit and nothing worked. And so then I was brought up Catholic, so I could remember the Our Father and the Hail Mary. And I said 2 of each of those, and I went to bed, and I expected nothing to happen. The next morning when I got up, the guys in this outlaw gang that I was in before work, we'd get high, and they come by my cell, and they said, come on, Doc, let's go get high. And I said, no, I'm not going to get high. And they just laughed at me because they had heard me say this numerous times in the prior 6 months, because they knew I was trying to quit. But something strange and wonderful happened that morning. When I said that, it felt like a peace came over me and a huge weight was lifted from my shoulders, and there was no desire to get high. But I remember pacing my cell back and forth because I'm so dumbfounded. I can't believe I'm not going down there to get high with these guys. It was just like I'd never touched anything before. And so over the course of the next couple of days, I started inventorying this, and I didn't want it to be a God thing, but I knew it was a God thing. That was the only thing different. And I come to the realization, if I was this wrong about God, I'm probably really wrong about a lot of the other ways I think also. And so I knew about AA, and I wanted to go to AA, but I got this big convict image. I won't go to AA. I won't go to the chapel. I've been there 3.5 years in this prison. I had to walk by the chapel every time. And I need to say, God put a burning desire in my heart to know him better. But what God did do, there was a guy who just got out of this 90-day long treatment program behind the wall that was prospecting for the gang that I was in. And so he was serious about staying sober, and he come up to my cell, and he told me about he gave me his big book to read. I started reading his big book, and he told me about what the first 2 weeks assignments were. And that was like, memorize the first 3 steps, read the first 5 chapters out of the big book, read the first 5 steps out of the 12 and 12. I'm doing this, I'm reading it, and I don't like what I'm reading. I get to step 3, it says, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to care of God as we understood him. And that step scared the hell out of me. Now think about how insane that is. I'm serving life without parole. That's my best decision making. And I'm afraid of what God's will might be for me. And then I get to step 4, and it said we made a searching, fearless, and moral inventory of ourselves. That was even worse. You mean I got to write down all this rotten, nasty things that I did? And then it just keeps getting worse. Then after you write it down, then you got to go tell somebody this. You got to go confess all this stuff to somebody. And if that ain't bad enough, it still got worse. It said love and tolerance is our code. That meant I had to be nice to people I didn't even like. And there was hardly anybody that I liked, including myself. And so I wasn't willing to do any of that. And you know what happened? I was still selling drugs and doing all that other stuff. And I used again on the 19th and 20th of January. And I'm glad that I did, because it taught me what in this book, those guys and gals that helped write this book, that's in this book, it's the truth. I can't get this by sitting next to someone else in a meeting. I can't get this by reading it. It's a chop the wood and carry the water program. I got to do what others have done if I want to get the same result. And that sold me out. So I went to this treatment program too. And that was an amazing deal because I had signed up for this treatment program about 9 months before this. And the reason I signed up for it was because I'd been busted so many times with drugs in the prison, I couldn't get a contact visit. And that's a good way to smuggle drugs in the prison. But they said, if you can complete this course, you can, this treatment program, you might get your visits back. So I signed up to go, and about a 90-day waiting period, first 90 days go by, I ain't ready to go. So I put it off. Another 90 days go by, I ain't willing to go. So I put it off. So the last period is coming. I'm supposed to go right before Christmas. And I'm thinking, gee, if I don't go now, they're probably not going to let me go. 3 strikes and I'm out, you know. So I decide to go. About a week before I'm supposed to go, I get a letter from them saying, sorry, we're going to continue you until after Christmas, until the end of February. God works in strange ways. Because during that period of time, on the 2nd of January, I have this eye-opening spiritual experience of which makes me teachable. And so I went in a treatment program and I did everything I was supposed to do. I wrote out that 4th step. I went and did that 5th step. And when I started emptying out the closet, I just broke down. And I sobbed virtually for 2 hours during that. And I know today, as I was letting the bad out, that was God entering in. And shortly after that, he began to talk to me. And he told me he was going to use me as a role model. He wanted me to work with old people and young people, and I had no idea what that meant. But so I'm beginning to change, and I'm starting to make amends. And I'm praying for guidance and direction. And I'm from South Dakota, and so I'm wondering, should I stay in Stillwater, try to witness to these guys? I don't know if I'm strong enough. Should I transfer back to Sioux Falls, where I'm making amends with my family and trying to work on those relationships? So I then say this feeble prayer a couple of days. I'll say this: prayer is a powerful thing. Watch out what you pray for, because it might not be answered the way you want it to be. But I said this prayer: God, give me guidance. What should I do? Should I stay here, go home? Not even knowing if I could. About on the 3rd day after saying that prayer twice, they lock you down at noon to count you. And then before they let you go back to work, you know, they count you and stuff. On this one day, then they come up to my cell and put me in leg irons and shackles and take me down to the security center. I get down here. Here's 4 or 5 of these guys from this gang I'm in, and they're going to transport us over to Oak Park Heights. Oak Park Heights was the first super maximum prison in the country. All the rest were some type of spin-off from it. And so anyway, I get over there and they throw us in a hole. I'm in the hole for a few hours. And before we get over there, I'm asking the guard, I said, so why was my name put on this list? Because by now I'm cleaned it up. I've been through this treatment program. This is 6 months later. I'm not doing any of the crap I was before. I'm playing it straight. And I've gone back to church and I'm started going to AA meetings. He said, the guard said, I don't know why your name was on this list. He said, we had this list with these other names on here for about a week. And then for some reason unknown to me, your name was added to the list last night. So I'm sitting in the hole and the guard comes by, have your stuff packed in the morning, you're going back to Sioux Falls. Now, is that odd or is that God? Is that answer to prayer? I choose to think it's answer to prayer. And I get back to South Dakota and they got a group called COPE, that's Cons on Preventive Education. And if you got the right status, you can go outside the prison, talk at schools and things like that, and talk to tourists when they come in, troubled kids. And it's different than Scared Straight. You go and you talk and tell them about the choices you made and the bad decisions, and trying to educate them not to do the same thing. And so also when I get back, I got to have a security hearing before a panel of associate wardens and the kangaroo court judge. And so I'm going in there and telling about my spiritual experience and what I'm doing, what I want to do. And they said, I'm asking for inside outside custody so I can go outside. And they said, well, we see you can talk to walk. Let's see if you can walk to talk. We'll see you in 6 months again to review your case. So I get involved with this COPE, and I'm in AA, and I'm setting up for meetings. I'm chairing meetings. I'm doing a step meeting. I'm writing letters. I'm on the steering committee, writing letters to groups to come in and speak. And one day I'm 16 months sober, and the Alacanere group, that's the prison group behind the walls, gets an invite to go to an outside meeting. And to my knowledge, it's the first time it ever happened, and it's the last time it ever happened. And so 3 of us would get chose to go. And I'm one of the 3, even though I got a life sentence. And by now, I've been outside quite a few times telling my story at schools and churches and whatever. And so when we get there, we were told all 3 of us would talk about 10 minutes. We should thank the groups for coming in, tell them about what we're learning in AA. We get up there and they're running short on time. So they said, there's only time for 1 of you to talk. So we drew sticks of gum to see who got to talk. So I drew the stick of gum. So I get up and talk about my spiritual experience, about AA, what I'm learning, thank the groups. Then they have their other speakers. And after the meeting, this little guy comes walking up to me. Now, God works in mysterious ways in my life. And so this little guy comes walking up to me and he says, if there's any way I can help you, just let me know. I said, well, next month, I'm going to go to the Board of Pardons and Parole to see if I can get my life sentence commuted. I said, you could write me a letter if you feel comfortable with it. And he says, oh, Gary Colbath is a personal friend of mine. I'll give him a phone call. Gary Colbath was an attorney from Rapid City who just happened to be the chairman of the Board of Pardons and Paroles. Now, that's kind of a wow moment for me. So that night they put me back in the county jail with these other guys to get us out on Sunday morning for the spiritual meeting. And I bump into this little guy again. And he says, you know, I've been thinking, I don't know the guy in this state that makes all the decisions, but I know somebody who does. His first cousin was the Lieutenant Governor, Walter Dale Miller. He said, I'll talk to him about you too. And so before I turned my life around, there was this guy named Delbert Peterson, who was a special agent for the DCI here in the state, 44 years, but he was a law enforcement officer. And he was like a cold case guy, and he would come in and he investigated the robbery that I did and recommended I do 20 years in prison. Well, he hears about my change. He gets me out to talk at some schools, and he's moved, and he calls all the parole board members asking them to commute my sentence. And so through this whole process, I know my job is to serve others, not to judge. And so I don't care who you are. There's a pecking order in prison. I don't care if you're a murderer or a child molester. If I can help you, I will help you. And I probably made enemies that way, but the staff really seen a difference in me. And so I went to that Board of Pardons and Paroles, and they recommended my life sentence be commuted to 75 years. So then after you get a recommendation, it goes to the governor's office, and he can sign. He has to either sign it or deny it before he leaves office. So the governor at the time was George Mickelson, and he waited till he got reelected to his second term, and then he signed that commutation, which commuted my sentence to 75 years. And so I get, during this process, I get sent to Springfield, which is a medium security prison. And I get there and I get real active in AA, and I'm staying in AA, and I'm there about 44 months, and everything's rolling along pretty good. And then one day I come in from work, and they throw me in a hole because they said someone called Crime Stoppers saying I'm planning to escape. So they ship me back to maximum security. I'm back there about a month, and we have a huge prison riot. And they send me off to this new prison. I'm there, so I'm back up there about 10 months, and they send me back to Springfield. But after I got sent back, I had saw the board again, and this was 4 years after they commuted my sentence. And even though they shipped me back to maximum security, I saw the board, and they recommended the 75 be commuted to 40. So they sent me back to Springfield the second time. I'm there 4 months this time. Someone calls Crime Stoppers again saying I'm planning to escape. They ship me back to Sioux Falls, throw me in the hole. I get out of the hole, and a month later, I get a letter from the Board of Pardons and Paroles because this recommendation has been sitting there for a year now, saying that they rescinded their recommendation from the governor's office. So that I did about another 3 years, something like that, 2.5, 3 years in maximum security, during which time I appealed to the board. They wouldn't do anything. They sent me to Springfield, back to Springfield there. And this time there, I'm 17 months. And I come up there for my yearly review. And they said, you're doing really well, but sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. We'll see you in a year. So just kind of testing the water. I said, well, what about trustee? Well, they said you have to see the parole board first. Well, I got 14 years before I see the parole board. So I asked them, just as a giggle, a laugh, I asked them, well, what about work release? They said, well, you can never have work release. You're a violent offender. So I said, okay. A month later, they call me back in and they say, we're going to give you an override. We're going to give you trustee. So they send me out on trustee, and I find there's this guy named Jim Razor, and he's in charge of community service and is fighting fires and cleaning up after tornadoes and floods and that kind of stuff. And I get put on this disaster crew because I heard that you could get a little extra good time, and I'm trying to whittle down this 75 years any way I can. And I talked to him this one day, and he said, he put me on the crew. A tornado strikes out at Spencer, South Dakota, wipes out the town. And we're out there this one morning. He says it's time to get a real job. And oh, wait, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. He said, I'm going to try to get you out. He said, I think you've done enough time. He said, if you can go 14 years in our system without a write-up, you can make it on the streets. And I'm just kind of wowed by this. So a couple of days later, I looked this guy up. I said, you really think you can get me out? He says, yeah, I think I can. He said, I just about got the Secretary of Corrections talked into this. He said, I want to send a message to other long-timers like you. I think they get in so much trouble because they have no hope of getting out. I want to send them a message of hope. And so a couple of weeks go by, and a van pulls into where I'm working out on this trustee place, and the Secretary of Corrections gets out and comes over to me, and he said, asked if there was a place we could talk. And I said, yeah. And he says, it's time to get a real job and start saving some money for when you get out. We're going to give you work release and send you down to the glory house. Well, I don't want this guy blowing any smoke at me. I know I'm a violent offender. I can't have it. And I'd say that to him. He says, well, I got the authority to send you down there. And if you do good, I'll talk to the governor about you. So I go down there. It's about 5 months to the day. It's December 13th. They got payphones in there. That's before cell phones for the residents in this halfway house to use. And so after 20 years in prison, if the phone rings, I just ignore it because I know it's not for me. And so the phone rings and no one else was around. I think it was the first time I answered the telephone. This lady comes on, asks for Reid Holiday. I said, that's me. She said, can you hold the governor? I'd like to talk to you. I said, sure. And the governor comes on, and I'm thinking, this don't sound like the governor. And I'm wondering two things. Is this the same person that called Crime Stoppers just playing a dirty trick on me? And the other thing is, excuse me, if this is the governor, I'm not going to blow it. So then he asked me two really tough questions. And he said, why do you think that judge gave you life without parole? And I'm thinking, alcoholic, drug addict, not learning from my mistakes. And before I can answer, he says, was it because you're a rotten, nasty son of a bitch? And I had to say, yes, sir. I said that, and the fact I wouldn't admit guilt, and I thought they screwed me around on my fast and speedy trial. And then he says, I guess I forgot to tell you, they recharged me and threw me back behind the walls. But anyway, that plea bargain, they offered me 10 years to plead. I didn't, the 9. Anyway, he says, asked me another question that was even tougher. He said, was anybody hurt in that robbery? And I'm thinking, I'm sure he knows the truth. I'm thinking, I don't want to lie because I'll probably drink or use if I do. I said, yes, sir. I beat the guy up pretty bad. And actually, that's an understatement. Because but anyway, then he says, this is what I'm going to do. He said, Mr. Bloomberg asked, I asked Mr. Bloomberg, that was the Secretary of Correction, who deserved a break for Christmas. He gave me your name. So I'm going to give you a 10-day furlough to go home for Christmas. He said, do you have a wife and kids? I said, no, I got a sick dad. I'd like to go see him and go ice fishing with my brother. He says, well, after that, I want you back at the Glory House for 30 days, and then I'm going to put you on unsupervised release. This is like 14 years before I was parole eligible. And so I get out, and this halfway house is right across the street from the Glory House. I mean, the Glory House is right across the street from what is now my home group, which is Southside. And so the second night I'm out, I'm allowed to walk across the street to a meeting. And I'm walking across the street, and I notice a guy hanging out in the parking lot. And as I get closer, this guy is walking up to me and says, are you Doc Holliday? I said, yes, I am. And before that, I was kind of wondering what's up here. He says, oh, well, a friend of yours told me you were getting out tonight and coming to a meeting. I'm here to walk you into your first meeting. And so I can't tell you how touched I was by that. And I get in there and I just tell people what my situation is. 20 years in prison, just got out, spiritual experience. I need help. And they didn't. You guys didn't care one bit about what I was in there for, how long I'd been in there. All you wanted to do was help. And so I was out a few months, and I seen this guy at meetings. And I'd see him in church, and I'd see him other places, like helping people all the time. And I knew he really had, I'd sat in meetings with him, and he really had a good command of the big book. And so I was sitting in that room one that sponsor told me about years before to go sit in a meeting, and I'm sitting in there, and they're talking about the fear inventory, part 2 of step 4. And these two guys are leading the meeting, and I have a revelation. That's all I can call it, is because I realized my entire life that I made nearly all my decisions based on emotion rather than what's the right thing to do. And behind it was this self-centered fear that the big book talks about. And so after the meeting, I talked to this one guy, and I said, what happened? And he said, I asked him, because I'm 11 years sober. And I asked him, do you think I should get a sponsor and work these steps again? He let me make my own decision, but he said, I think it would be wise. I think you would learn a lot. And so I did. And I asked this other guy to do that. And he said he would. About a week later, I get a call from him, and he said, we're going to meet at this guy's house. We're going to go through the big book, and there's going to be a group of us. And when the book says to do something, we're going to stop and do it. And I'm so glad that I did, because without having done an inventory out of the big book, I knew I did a lot of rotten, nasty things, but I never knew why I did them until I did an inventory with the way it's written in this book. And that was a life-changing event for me, and how to do amends properly. And I went through all the rest of my amends list, and I've made all my amends except one, and I don't think I can ever find this person. God's grace and God's mercy runs just so infinitely, so deep. So I believe in it so much that today, I got my trials and my struggles, and my health isn't good. I lost my wife in January to cancer. That's one of the toughest things I ever had to do. I've had a heart attack, survived that by the grace of God. I got a stint in May by the grace of God. Right now I'm dealing with prostate cancer, and it's starting to spread. But my faith today is that everything will be just the way it's supposed to be if I just continue to serve God and try to do the next right thing. I believe there are no hopeless cases. There might be if you're a sociopath or a dry drunk, but overall, I don't believe there's any hopeless cases, because if this program can work for a loser like me, it can work for anybody who does the work, and I thoroughly believe that. grace or mercy gave me another chance. Grace gave me a new life. And I think I don't know how, I think I got a few minutes left here. I'll share one deal that happened when I came back from Stillwater, and I had this, after having this spiritual experience, I got a job working in the prison kitchen. And part of the reason I did that, the food was better. We could eat a little better. But there was a guard in there, and he knew me before I went to Stillwater, knew what a jerk I was, to play it politely. And he saw the changes in me when I come back. And one day then, he told me he was going to take a trip and go visit a friend of his down south. And when he got back, he smuggled in a medallion to give it to me. Because he said when he saw this medallion that they were giving out in his treatment program, he said it made him think of me. And on the inscription on this medallion said, I ain't what I want to be. I ain't what I'm going to be. But praise God, I ain't what I used to be. And then he shared with me that we had the same sobriety birthday. He had 4 more years than I did, but the 21st of January is both our birthdays. And I've had a chance to see him now years later. By the way, February 1st was 22 years I've been out of prison. So if there's any people out there thinking this won't work for you, anybody hearing this Zoom meeting, don't believe the lie. I believe it will work for you. But I had to pursue this like I would pursue a drink. I had to make this the center of my life. And I believe in first things first. God, recovery, and family, but God and recovery must come first, for me anyway. And by the grace of God, I am what I am. And to God be the glory. There's so much more I could talk about, but I'm about running out of time, I think. So I'll just leave it there. And if you guys got any questions or anything, I'll stay on here a little bit and we can chat. Thank you.